Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, udvar Adonai merushalayim. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, udvar Adonai merushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo, Yisrael b'kedushato. Baruch shenatan Torah le'ama, Yisrael b'kedushato. Ya la la la, ya la la, ya la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Ay, ya la la, ya la la, ya la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Baruch shenatan Torah le'ama, Yisrael b'kedushato. Baruch shenatan Torah le'ama, Yisrael b'kedushato. Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach. Baruch Adonai v'rach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher baruch banu im kol ha'amim, ve'natan lanu et torato. Brucha aya shechinah notenet ha'torah. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome, folks. Before we jump in, I wanted to give a chance to folks for whom this is your first or maybe your second time joining us to say hello, to unmute and introduce yourselves and where you're zooming in from, because we like to know who's joining us. And if you're able to put your cameras on, we love that too. Anybody? And yeah, you can have your cameras on even if you're eating. It's all good. Marcy, you want to introduce yourself to say hello?
Sure. I was just feeling shy for a minute. My name's Marcy. I'm actually here in Berkeley, but I'm a little under the weather, so I'm on Zoom instead of in person. And I think I was at the morning service once before, and I joined you for Yom Kippur, which was very, very meaningful for me.
Hey, thanks for being here. I hope to see you in person when you're feeling better. Refuah shlema. Anyone else?
May I speak?
You may speak.
I'm Elliot Zashin. I live in Northwest Indiana. I'm originally from the Chicago area. I've been coming to some of the Beit Tikkun events, and I wanted to try your Torah study. I'm a long enthusiast of Torah study, having been in a Reconstructionist congregation for many years, and now somewhere in limbo between sort of non-Zionist or anti-Zionist congregations, but I like to think of Torah study as something special beyond the politics. So I'm curious to see who's here, and hope we'll have a lively discussion. And thank you for providing this.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. We will have a lively discussion if previous Torah studies are any indication, representation. Anyone else? Thanks for unmuting and introducing yourself. And is your name Elliot? Am I right? Am I reading that right? I'm too far from this.
Yeah, that's correct, Elliot. Yeah, Eli.
Great, thank you.
Mordecai, but Elliot, yes.
Anyone else want to introduce yourself? Michelle.
Good morning. I've been in your Torah studies for quite a while now. Just such a blessing to be with your congregation. I pray for you every day. I just think you are such a strong, beautiful human being. And it's just such a blessing every Torah study with you. I watch you on Zoom, the YouTube. You're just a blessing. You're a blessing. And I just want to thank you because you make me stronger.
Oh.
Your faith, your courage.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you so much. So glad you're here. Let that wash over me for a moment. Thank you. Shifra, welcome.
Hey, I think I just wanted, I'm not going to be able to stay on for very long, but I really enjoyed the service that I heard, a combination of the traditional and the feminist, and the, just the way you're addressing so many of the issues that we're facing. And I thank you for this. It's just such a challenging time with the election and with what's happening. And I just I just hope that I and all of us can, in the midst of all this, hold to the vision of the beloved community, and hold to the world that we want to see as much as possible, in the midst of acknowledging what's going on, and keep holding the vision, because I still believe, ani mamina be'emunah shlema b'viat hamashiach u'mashiach, and even though it may be delayed, and that we will somehow get through these times, and that the universe, I believe, with all the horrors, still evolving in the direction of love. I'm choosing to believe that. I want to be a part of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Beautiful words.
Amen.
Amen. Yes, thank you for being.
Amen.
Yeah, we are all part of that Mashiach, right? There isn't a Mashiach outside of us. We are the Mashiach. And how we choose to act and engage is part of what brings forth the possibilities of possibilities. So, yeah, thanks for showing up and being in community together. It's a blessing for all of us. Thank you. Okay, so we this week we are reading this parsha is just packed. Let's just start there. It's got so much going on. I was reading it again. I was like, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? So we'll do what we do, right? And what we do, for those of you who are new, is we read in English. It's projected onto the screen from Blessing Safaria. And then I'll interrupt with thoughts and reflections and questions, and we'll have some discussion. And then when the discussion withers down a little bit, then we'll read some more. And that's how we do that here. And we may go into breakout group. We may not, break connecting rooms. We may not, depending on how the conversation and time flows. But there is a lot in this parsha, and I actually would like to get through the whole thing if we can, because there's so many things happening. So we are in the week of Vayera. So remember, we had Bereshit, Noach, and then we had Lech Lecha. Here we are in Vayera. And in this week, it's more of the story. We're deep into Abraham, the story of Abraham. And if you remember in the story of Noach, we talked about Noach being this discussion of the rabbis, like, what does it mean for Noach to have been blameless, kind of righteous in his generation? And we had this discussion. Well, he wasn't Abraham, because he didn't argue with God. So we're going to see that argument that Abraham has with God in this parsha. And so there's, I am going to jump in there with a little bit of reflections and teaching, but we'll also have some discussions, of course. So I think we'll just jump right in so we can hopefully get through it. And if somebody wants to read it, Heidi, are you open to starting of the reading? Are you feeling good for that today? Good morning, Heidi.
Morning, everybody. Shabbat shalom. Yeah. Let me get the screen organized. Okay. I'm coming. Okay. Yud He Vav He appeared to him by the terebinths of Mamre. He was sitting at the entrance of the tent as the day grew hot. Looking up, he saw 3 figures standing near him. Perceiving this, he ran from the entrance of the tent to greet them, and, bowing to the ground, he said, "My lords, if it please you, do not go on past your servant. Let a little water be brought. Bathe your feet and recline under the tree. And let me fetch you a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourself. Then go on, seeing that you have come your servant's way. They replied, "Do as you have said." Abraham hastened into the tent of Sarah and said, "Quick, 3 sehas of choice flour. Knead and make cakes." Then Abraham ran to the herd, took a calf, tender and choice, and gave it to a servant boy who hastened to prepare it. He took curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them, and he waited on them under the tree as they ate. They said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he said, "There in the tent." Then one said, "I will return to you next year, and your wife Sarah shall have a son." Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah had stopped having her periods. And Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "Now that I've lost the ability, am I to have enjoyment with my husband so old?" Then Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I in truth bear a child old as I am?' Is anything too wondrous for Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh? I will return to you at the same season next year, and Sarah shall have a son." Sarah lied, saying, I did not laugh, for she was frightened. Came the reply, "You did laugh." The agents set out from there and looked down toward Sodom, Abraham walking with them to see them off. Now,
I'm going to pause us here for I'm going to pause us here for a moment. So this beginning of this parsha is right, Abraham's welcoming people into his tent, and there's lots of conversations and commentaries and reflections about this. Is one of the things that we love about Abraham as one of our ancestors is that he welcomed people into his home, into his tent. And sometimes we talk about the fact that the chuppah at a wedding is reflective of Abraham, and you have it open on 4 sides so that your home is always open for people to come in. And so here he is welcoming these strangers who are messengers of the divine. And so it's interesting too to me here that God gets all upset with Sarah, or they get upset with Sarah for laughing. But earlier in the previous parsha, Abraham, when God told Abraham you were going to have a child, he also laughed. But we have a little bit of sexism going on here because he didn't get chastised for it the way she just did. So here's one of the things about our ancestor Abraham that we love is that he welcomes the stranger. He has his doors open and welcomes others. And I'd like to think that tradition that Abraham set for our people, set for all of his offspring, all peoples of his offspring, right? All of the Abrahamic traditions, that he welcomes, that we can all be so welcoming, right? That we could imagine a world that is safe enough that we could have our doors open and welcome people in. And it's so hard for us to do that, and both physically, but also, right, even emotionally and even spiritually in our hearts, to open our hearts to the other, to the stranger. So I just want us to hold that as we reflect, as we continue. And I see that, Neil, your hand is raised.
Yes, I see. I've never seen this before, but it's so striking to me now that the persons of deeper consciousness in our tradition, be it the patriarchs, Moses, and later the prophets, that initially, because of the social historical time they're in, when they're getting a message, there's initially a sense of doubt. And yet, despite the doubt, there's something deeper that moves them along. Later on, Moses, when encountered at the burning bush, is, "Why are you picking me? I'm a man of clumsy speech." And most of the prophets, including in the story of Jonah and the whale, initially hearing God's vision of the future, run from it and initially feel a sense of inadequacy or disbelief. And yet, despite that, something seems to fall in place.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes when we hear divine speak to us, we don't want to hear the message, right? And it's interesting because as this parsha goes on, you'll see where Abraham doesn't actually have that problem in a place where you would think he would. So it's an interesting. Thank you, Neil. Anyone else have any other reflections on this? Just what we've read thus far, and then we'll keep going if not. Okay, Heidi, you want to keep reading for us?
Sure. Now, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Since Abraham is to become a great and populous nation, and all the nations of the earth are to bless themselves by him? For I have singled him out, that he may instruct his children and his posterity to keep the way of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, by doing what is just and right, in order that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh may bring about for Abraham what has been promised him." Then Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said, "The outrage of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grave. I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will take note." The
So
eighth.
here, sorry. So there's something really interesting that happens here. Austin, can you scroll up to the beginning of where we just started rereading, which is when God says, "Shall I reveal?" There we go. "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do?" So here's something really interesting, right? God's like, I think I'm going to tell Abraham that I'm about to destroy this Sodom and Gomorrah and see what happens. And so some commentaries think, some of the rabbis think this is another test of Abraham. Like he's inviting Abraham into a dialogue with God and kind of saying, is he worthy of becoming a great and populous nation? If he is, he'll engage with me. It says so. Abraham Joshua Heschel has this wonderful book, God in Search of Man. We could say human beings. And this is an example of it. God's like, ooh, I think I'm gonna expose this and see what Abraham does. And so we're going to now read this engagement of what happens when God then just discloses to him. So thank you.
Okay. "I will go down and see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will take note." The agents went on from there to Sodom, where Abraham remained standing before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Abraham came forward and said, "Will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? What if there should be 50 innocent within this city? Will you wipe out the place and not forgive it for the sake of the innocent 50 who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the innocent as well as the guilty, so that the innocent and guilty fare alike. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly?" And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh answered, "If I find within the city of Sodom 50 innocent ones, I will forgive the whole place for their sake." Abraham spoke up, saying, "Here I venture to speak to my Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. What if the 50 innocent should lack 5? Will you destroy the whole city for the want of the 5? I will not destroy if I find 45 there." But he spoke up again and said, "Well, what if 40 should be found there? I will not do it for the sake of 40. And he said, "Well, let not my Lord be angry if I go on. What if 30 should be found there? I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, I venture to speak to my Lord. What if 20 should be found there? I will not destroy for the sake of 20. And he said, let not my Lord be angry if I speak but this last time. What if 10 should be found there? I will not destroy for the sake of 10. Having finished speaking to Abraham, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh departed, and Abraham returned to his place.
Okay, let's pause. Let's go back through this a little bit. There's so much to unpack here. So first, right, God invites Abraham into this debate. Like, it's as if God is saying, I need help. I'm really angry and I need someone to help me think through my anger here. So Abraham, what should I do? And now Abraham's engaging with him, and he starts with 50 and then he negotiates down, right, to 10. And there's this great teaching that that's how we get the minyan of 10 because of this debate. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs points out that the word tzaddik in this just in that what we just read appears 7 times. Tzaddik is the righteous in the course of Abraham's plea to God. And the word mishpat forms the beginning and end of Abraham's most piercing challenge. Shall not the judge, hashofet, of all the earth do justice? Mishpat. Right? So he's really arguing like, wait, if you're so just, if you're the just one of the whole earth, why are you acting so unjust? Shouldn't you be doing justice? And so he's crying out here for, God to act justly. This is where I like to argue that there's many places in our teachings, in the Torah and in the Talmud and in other places, where I make the argument that shows that protest is actually part and parcel of being Jewish. Here's Abraham protesting with the divine. If Abraham can stand up to the divine and protest with the divine, we can stand up and protest. And in fact, there's lots of argument to be made that we have an obligation to protest when we see injustice, when we see just things not happening. And one of them is in the Talmud, in Shabbat 54b. It says this beautiful teaching. It's kind of amazing. And it says, if someone in your family is engaging in sin or in something unjust, then you have an obligation to protest, otherwise you are held responsible. But then this teaching continues and says, and if someone in your town or community is engaging, or if your community or town is engaging in sin or injustice, then you have an obligation to protest, or you are responsible. And it goes one step further. If someone in the world or the world is engaging in sin, then you have an obligation to protest, or else you are held responsible for that sin. And it reminds me of Abraham Joshua Heschel's teaching that some are guilty, but all are responsible. And it feels so apropos in this historical moment that we're in, particularly when so much effort's being made by empires around the world, right? In the United States, in Israel, in Europe, to shut down protest and to shut down Jewish protest that's protesting actions by a nation state that calls itself a Jewish state. And it's shutting it down. But in fact, protesting and resisting injustice and standing up to injustice and naming it as injustice is the most Jewish thing we can be doing. And here's just the beginning of the text for that. And you'll remember in Exodus that the midwives stand up to Pharaoh and protest his orders to kill the Hebrew babies. And it happens again and again in our Torah. Moses and Aaron protest God many times. And so it really is part of our tradition to protest. Yeah, Evelyn.
I'm thinking how difficult it would be for Abraham to do this, to face God.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, where does the motivation come from that he would overcome his fear?
Yeah.
And I guess his passion. I'm thinking that could be one of the things that it really mattered to him. So I think it's for a lesson for us that no matter how difficult it is, we can somehow find the strength from wherever to actually speak out.
Beautiful. Thank you. I think Joyce, your hand is up if I'm not mistaken. Thank you, Evelyn.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I don't see.
We see you. We hear you. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, this just shows how anti Netanyahu is.
And Yahoo's doing Empire quite well. Judith.
I once heard a midrash on this, specifically on what this cry was that God heard that came up from Sodom or Gomorrah. And it was the cry of there was some kind of a dictum that was established in one or both of these towns by the powers that be, that told people they could not help anybody who needed assistance. And a young woman defied that dictum and was helping a poor person, and she was attacked, and I guess the cry came from her as they were killing her. And that was the cry that God heard, that brought God's attention to what was going on. And, it's a classic example of risking your life to do the right thing.
Yeah, I remember that midrash. Yeah, that it was so corrupt that the message of the town was don't help each other. I mean, so, and when I think about that, I think about places that have, banned people from growing gardens or feeding the hungry, or which is happening, right? Those things are literally happening. We're helping other people's being criminalized, and that's a history in our country, right? Like, that's not new. That is what our country is, sadly. So yeah, Riley.
So I was really struck by what you said, but also about Abraham doing such a good job handling God. There's almost, I don't want to call it manipulation, but there's a good way of dealing with this. I definitely notice, and maybe I'm seeing this only through modern eyes, but there's a certain amount of flattering before going on with the complaints, and very gently with the questioning of the complaints. But it does make me think of a positive side of God's chosen people, which is chosen to speak up against what is wrong, and how powerful that is. And it feels like, I now want a bumper sticker that says, Abraham would have argued about Palestine, yeah. Abraham would have said you were wrong, just as a reminder of where you're called to not do this. Sodom is not Abraham's people, and yet, with no question, he says, would you really do this when there are even like 10 people here? And I also wonder if Yahweh leaving is also like 10 is as far as you could get him. If he had kept going, would he have gotten him down to 1? I don't know, but that also really interested me in terms of looking at that. So thank you. And yes, I think it's clearly a call to speak up whenever something's unjust, even if it comes from what looks like a divine source. And that seems an especially good answer to Israel right now and to Israel's action. If they imagine that it's from a divine source, to be reminded of the lack of humanity still contained within. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Andre, please.
I've been thinking about what's going on here and how brilliantly the Torah is written, in the sense that as we listen to the Torah's words that are spoken by God, we have reactions, and reacting to what God has said about destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. A natural thing would be for us to question that. So very quickly, what the Torah does is to put the words that we might be thinking and considering into Abraham's mouth. So it's expressed. And then that allows God to answer our questions that we may have had silently as we heard the first part of the teaching, and respond to Abraham in a way that we can understand, or we can hear what God is saying. So the dialogue between God and Abraham is, at least for me, an internal dialogue that I'm having as precipitated by the words of the Torah itself. And it makes it accessible and very personal. That's all.
Beautiful. Right. I mean, you can almost read in it, right? Like the different voices of divine or of human beings being expressed. Like on one hand, like, I'm so sick and tired of these people who are so immoral, who attack people for helping people. I'm just going to kill them all off. Right. And then you can hear on the other hand, the other people saying, but wait a minute, there's got to be some good people there. Are we really going to kill them all off? Is that really just? Because of course the Torah is a representation of human articulation of what they're hearing, right? So yeah, you can hear that debate in that very conversation. Thank you for that. Evelyn, I wanted to go back for a moment to what you said, which was, the courage it took Abraham to stand up to God and question and argue with God, and so you were asking, like, what is it within him? And I guess I want to turn that question within each of us, like, what is it within us that allows us to, in a moment when it's really, like we were praying earlier, we shall not be embarrassed. And I always shout out, right? No way. We shall not be embarrassed to declare the possibility of a world based on love and justice. And so what is it within us that might allow us to speak out when we're feeling afraid? And I've been asking myself that a lot lately. And as the next 4 years go on, I think it's a question a lot of us may need to ask ourselves. When are we willing to stand up? A couple of people called me recently to say, I kind of want to do this, but I'm afraid of the impact on me and I'm not sure what to do. And, so we just talked about it. I did not tell them what to do, but I helped them think through how they find their answer to that question. And I wonder if what might have been going through Abraham, if I think of all of us as divine sparks of the divine, excuse me. And if I think of divine source as part of the divine source as love, right? I always talk about it's everywhere, right? Like it's gravity, love is everywhere. So it's in us. I wonder if it was Abraham's love for humanity. I mean, a moment before that, he's welcoming in these strangers who are messengers of God, but he might not know that right away. And he's bowing down to them and cooking them food and welcoming them. Or well, Sarah and the servant are cooking them food, but he's serving them. And so I just take a moment and just close your eyes for a moment and think of a time in your life. I think most of us have probably had a time in our lives where we were embarrassed or scared or torn or uncomfortable about saying something that we felt needed to be said, or challenging something that we felt needed to be challenged. And what was it within you, or when you've seen other people doing it, what do you think it was within them that allowed them to do that?
General Adara's jade dragoons would throw them into the sea. If she was there, they launched them.
Hey, Rabbi. Someone, Kamal, has his hand raised, I believe, in the chat.
Okay, one sec, thank you. So I'm just going to look at the chat for a moment. I'm not really tracking it. So sense of community. Yeah, so go ahead and put in chat what it is.
It looks like it's Kamal.
Yeah, I got
Yeah.
it. Thank you. Before we do that, I just want folks to be invited to put into chat what it is that gives you the courage. Parents who encourage dissent when growing up, community. Okay, Kamal, go ahead and unmute if you can.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
I'm just fixed on 16. How Yerahave had said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" Is it though having respect for the I am and I shall be and what I picked for myself. I am who I want to be. And so I think Yerahave was like, okay, let's see what greatness and divinity came from the tree of life of the beginning to the end and back. And to me is one of the most profound observations. And I'm just so happy that there is a discipline that I happen to be part of that recognizes this. And then, of course, the gift of life.
Yeah.
Which is from your point of view, Rabbi Kat, from your kind to present something like this to me is profound. And as far as the way I see it, I am the beginning, I am the end, and I choose to cohort with individuals who recognize this challenge, this challenge of being divine as an individual, and we can only pray that this divinity of a good source can osmotically be part of everyone else. And that's all I have to say about this. It's quite brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it is stunning that somebody thought to say God's going to ask God's going to ask Abraham, a mere mortal, and we've talked in previous weeks. If some of you who were there might remember of God getting older, if you will, God getting more conscious of God's godliness, and so here's maybe a point, like right where I think as human beings, I can speak for myself, but I don't think I'm alone in this, that there's times when we can witness ourselves engaging in ways that are not who we want to be. And maybe we turn to friends or to the divine within to help us. Like, this is how I'm thinking about reacting here. I'm triggered. Something tells me it's not such a great idea, so I'm going to, call a friend, right? Call a lifeline, call a friend. And that's kind of what God is doing here. And it's kind of brilliant and beautiful, right? Like God's literally looking to a human being, recognizing maybe that there's divine in the human being that in that moment can access its divine source more than that divine entity itself can access its divine source. And truly, truly magnificent, right? And I think it also can kind of say to us, oh, we get a pass sometimes too, right? We get to turn to others to get help when we're feeling so angry that we want to react. And it reminds me of the prayer we said earlier in the line, who knows how to turn anger strength to furthering life's intentions? And maybe that's that moment where God's like, I do not know how to turn anger strength to furthering life's intentions, because anger is a strength. And we have to use it in a way that does further life intentions, which is true of all emotions, right? Like, how do we use them to further life's intentions? And God's like, I'm going to turn to Abraham, get some help here. So I've been reading, skimming what you've all been saying in the chat, and it's just so beautiful. And I just want you all to glance at what each other's saying and take into your heart all the inspiration that you have from within and from others to stand up and speak truth and challenge injustice and say what needs to be said, because that's really what we need to do in this moment. And thinking that we're alone, which is, right, the capitalist ethos, right? Like we're all individual, separate atoms doing our own thing, undermines our courage and undermines our trust that we have an impact. So you've heard me say so much, one of the things I love about Judaism is the integration of self and community, that it's about how we create a world as a community, not just how we live our individual lives. And so here it is true as well that we get sustenance and we get courage and we get strength from seeing that other people both want the same thing and are willing to stretch themselves to help build that. So thank you all for those beautiful reflections. So we can continue reading. Heidi, if you're good, if you're not too tired.
2 messengers arrived in Sodom in the evening, as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to greet them, and bowing low with his face to the ground, he said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house to spend the night and bathe your feet. Then you may be on your way early." But they said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly. So they turned his way and entered his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. They had not yet lain down when the town council and the militia of Sodom, insignificant and influential alike, the whole assembly without exception, gathered about the house. And they shouted to Lot and said to him, "Where are the ones who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may be intimate with them." So Lot went out to them to the entrance, shut the door behind him, and said, "I beg you, my friends, do not commit such a wrong. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not yet known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you please, but do not do anything to the others, since they have come under the shelter of my roof."
Oy. Okay, yeah, keep going. You can keep going, Heidi.
But they said, "Stand back. The fellow," they said, "came here as an alien, and already he acts the ruler. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." and they pressed hard against that householder, against Lot, and moved forward to break the door. But the agents stretched out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And the people who were at the entrance of the house, low and high alike, they struck with blinding light so that they were helpless to find the entrance. They were struck with blinding light, I guess. So they were helpless to find the entrance. Then the agent said to Lot, "Whom else have you here? Sons-in-law, your sons and daughters, or anyone else that you have in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place." Because the outcry against them before Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has become so great that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh has sent us to destroy it.
So I'm going to jump in here for a moment 'cause I'm just noticing something. So these are the angels of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, and they're saying the outcry against them, meaning the kind of like what you brought up, Judith, like the woman's cry was so piercing. The outcry against the evilness of these cities was so great that God is going to destroy the whole place. So this is interesting to me. Like, if I have an outcry that's so powerful, I don't really believe that the divine hears it and is going to respond and wipe out the whole place. But that's what's being said here. Like, God's hearing the outcry so intensely that God's responding. So that's what's happening here. It's amazing. Yeah, Heidi, go ahead. Unless anyone else, I don't see any hands, so we're good.
So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who'd married his daughters and said, "Up, get out of this place, for Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to his sons-in-laws as one who jests. As dawn broke, the messengers urged Lot on, saying, "Up, take your wife and your 2 remaining daughters, lest you be swept away because of the iniquity of this city." Still he delayed. So the agent seized his hands and the hands of his wife and his 2 daughters in Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's mercy on him and brought him out and left him outside the city. When they had brought them outside, one said, "Flee for your life. Do not look behind you. Do not stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, lest you be swept away." But Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lord. You have been so gracious to your servant and have already shown me so much kindness in order to save my life, but I cannot flee to the hills lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Look, that town there is near enough to flee to. It is such a little place. Let me flee there. It is such a little place, and let my life be saved." He replied, "Very well, I will grant you this favor too, and I will not annihilate the town of which you have spoken. Hurry, flee there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there." Hence the town came to be called Zoar. As the sun rose upon the earth and Lot entered Zoar, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah sulfurous fire from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh out of heaven, annihilating those cities and the entire plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities and the vegetation on the ground. Lot's wife looked back, and she thereupon turned into a pillar of salt.
So I'm going to pause us here I'm going to jump in for one moment here. Um, so I'm curious about Lot's wife looking back and turning into a pillar of salt. And so I've been reflecting on this. Well, what is it about looking back? She's not there, right? She's not actually there, but she's looking back. She's standing in the same place as Lot or close. But there's something about, so the way I was thinking about this, and I'm curious of other people's reflections, but there's something about looking back and yearning potentially for the past that makes it hard for us to move into the future when what we're looking back on the past is this awful past, and yet somehow we're maybe wanting to go back to that past. And it makes me think of the tension and trauma and challenge we're having in our country and in Israel and other places to really look back at the past of our countries, the founding of our countries, the histories of our countries, the lies that were told about that, and how we look back. And it makes it hard for us to move forward because we're not willing to really take in what's happened in the past and carry it with us to go forward. So that was just kind of what came to my mind. There's something very powerful about she looked back and turned to salt. She somehow got caught up in it. Now, of course, her family, right? Like, don't forget, her sons and her daughter-in-laws are still there. Her daughters and sons-in-laws have now been killed, so she's probably in incredible grief. And one of the teachings about this is she turned to salt because she was so upset and she just cried tears. So, Kamal, do you have your hand up again?
Oh, thank you again.
Yeah.
Again, this is incredible. In my opinion, the way I see this is a book that has written such wonderful, understandable words about an observation made so long ago, whether a story or not, and how it impacts us now today this is so profound. Back to 17 again. You have been so gracious to your servant and have already shown me so much kindness in order to save my life, but I cannot flee to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. We're seeing that today. People who can't flee, they can't run. There's no place to go. And the greatness of Hirei Vavi to give a place to flee, to move away from something that's terrible that's going to happen, is something that we should do together as individuals to allow for a place to that in itself is. And then the idea of looking at light and turning to salt. Salt was a currency at one point. It was a currency. It was used as if you were poor if you didn't have enough salt, as to the sacrifice to give life to others and not to look at the light. She was told not to look. And then today we know not to look either. We'll lose our eyesight in the terribleness of the weapons that we created today. So that it's just compact between 17 and 24. It's just so much here to look at. And that's what I have to say about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger, good to see you.
Yeah, yeah, I'm a little sick, so I didn't come in person. Well, from the profound to the trivial, I was just noticing that this sounds like a volcanic eruption, and that Lot's wife is turned into a pillar of salt, kind of like the Pompeii mummified peoples, and then elaborate stories are woven to explain why it hit her and not someone else. Anyway, just sort of a footnote. That's all.
Yeah, great, beautiful. It made me think of the phosphorus weapons that are being used today.
Mm. Yeah.
When I was reading this, yeah. Neil, did you just wave your hand to raise it? Go ahead.
One of the things that's so engaging about this is the multi levels of interpretations, that more than one thing can be true simultaneously. It just occurred to me that the cities on the plain were so self-absorbed and greedy that in his fear and fight or flight, Lot was going for the familiar of wanting to return to another city, which later on we learn things did not turn out all that well, where he was instructed to go into the wilderness. Following the exodus from Egypt, the wilderness was not a punishment, it was a place of being free from the social and conventions of empire and the possibility to, rather than reacting to things, start to generate something healthier and more life enhancing. And yet Lot did not choose the unknown. He thought he'd be safe by returning to the familiar, as if this city was somehow going to be any different than those within the same cultural, sociological set of influences.
Nice, beautiful. And you're saying that makes me think about, he said, told him to go to the hills. And when you're in the hills, you get a better vision, right? It's a more expansive vision. And so, we always talk about Min HaMetzar, the place of constriction. And then when you call out to God, God answers from the place of expansiveness. And so he's in the city and you can't see so well. But if you step up and get a better view, you get a more expansive picture of what's possible and of what the world can hold. So thank you for that. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. I can't see everybody. So if you have your hand raised, I'm not calling on you. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just not seeing everyone's name. So Austin's helping by letting me know, but also just, if no one.
Lynn, can I just mention there is an element in here that reminds me of climate change and that understanding really about us being able to find a way again to, I guess, that littler space in many ways, but it is something that is, again, protecting, or it is living simply. That's all. Yeah.
Nice. Here we go. Great, thank you. Okay, now you're all on my screen with the words. Perfect. Okay, let's continue.
Next morning, Abraham hurried to the place where he had stood before Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and looking down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and all the land of the plain, he saw the smoke of the land rising like the smoke of a kiln. Thus it was that when God destroyed the cities of the plain and annihilated the cities where Lot dwelt, God was mindful of Abraham and removed Lot from the midst of the upheaval. Lot went up from Zoar and settled in the hill country with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar, and he and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. And the older one said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to consort with us in the way of all the world. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and let him lie with us, that we may maintain life through our father." That night they made their father drink wine, and the older one went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she rose. The next day the older one said to the younger one, "See, I lay with father last night. Let me make him drink wine tonight, and you go and lie with him, that we may maintain life through our father." That night they also made their father drink wine, and the younger one went and lay with him. He did not know when she lay down or when she rose. Thus the 2 daughters of Lot became pregnant with their father. The older one bore a son and named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. The younger one also bore a son, and she called him Ben Amami. He is the father of the Ammonites of today.
Mm. Yeah. Did you want to say more other than ugh?
It's hard to read, man. It's really hard to read.
Yeah, it's hard to read. I remember reading this in the past and thinking about this in the following way, which is it's often told that they're doing a really great service to carry on their people. And I kind of had this question about the historical relationship between Lot and his daughters. And here's my thinking on this, which is that they wouldn't have had that thought if they hadn't already experienced sexual abuse from their father.
Mm.
So that's how I read that, as a continuation of that trauma, and not like, I don't believe that daughters really would think to do that, but unless it's already been something that they've been conditioned to think was normal or okay. That's not, certainly that's not how it's interpreted in the rabbinic tradition at all, obviously. It's read as they're doing something to help carry on the tradition. But that's not how I read it. So,
But Kat, are these two other peoples part of the tradition?
they're not, I mean, they're the Moab and the Ammonites, so they're not
Yeah.
still,
So
then they
it's
end up becoming, yeah, they end up becoming the other and the people we fight against. Yeah.
yes. So it's not a continuation. It's another othering.
Right. Right. And maybe, and that's an interesting point, honey. Maybe it's written that way more to kind of make us other them even more, right? To justify the othering. Right. So we're going to,
Or the the other way then to think about it is like many of the Arab peoples, and now like these other two groups, we're half siblings of all these different groups that we consider the other.
right.
So gross.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Can I mention, this is Lynn, can I mention that there is a really remarkable understanding, as I've found out, reading a very helpful book about the Moabite daughters-in-law of Naomi, and about this understanding of one of them went back again to live in her own country, but this again of the interrelatedness that is really a part of that love, that is, it's kinship. That's really one of the love elements that we have definitely transgressed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Between countries. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Liz, please welcome. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. Mhm.
This may be something I should already know, and I'm sorry if it is. Lot is Abraham's nephew, correct?
Yes.
And so it ends up being that the Ammonites are related to the Jews, just like now. It's a complete and total parallel to what's happening now. That
Yeah.
these folks are siblings, and they were they were at some point blood relations to them. I don't
Right.
know if they knew that,
Right.
but they were at some point blood relations.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot here about how we push people out of our hearts and other them, right? So yeah, lots to reflect on about that. Yeah, thank you. Joyce, I see you.
Thank you. So what are we supposed to think about the people that are descended from that incest? I mean, if it was supposed to continue humankind, I guess I don't know what the connection is between the rest of us and people who are the descendants. So maybe you can just talk about that a little. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Yeah, I think that's what Heidi and I were touching upon, and what all of us were touching upon, which is, so if this Torah is written by people, right, then this story could be put in there to justify the ways in which we other tribes, other peoples, rather than it be the truth about what really happened. And so it can justify, if we think about this as being a bad thing, which I think in modern times, at least, we think about it that way. Incest we think about as a bad thing. And so therefore, it makes it easier for us to say, well, the Ammonites and the Moabites are bad other people. And of course, there is Ruth, who's a Moabite, who we all uplift. I have a whole nother interpretation of that story, but nonetheless, she does carry on our tradition as well. So it can be read in so many ways. It can be read as othering, but can also be read as the way in which we so also welcome the stranger into our tradition, and they carry on some of the most important elements of our tradition. So it's kind of beautiful in that complexity, in that tension that we hold. So Mark, and then Rebecca, and then Debbie. Mark, did you want to say something? You're still muted if you did. There.
Thank you. There we go. And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
I,
shalom.
I was told that, or heard that David comes from the lineage of the Moabites. And so then Mashiach comes from there too, which is kind of profound to speak towards this whole moment.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. Rebecca.
Hi. This story also kind of connotes for me that building the negative stereotype against women as being conniving and untrustworthy, and look what they do. They take advantage of situations. So yeah, and then look what they create when they do that. But on the other hand, like your interpretation about the trauma and possibly, them being the sexual abuse, I mean, didn't he offer them to the mob? And then, they turn around and do this. So yeah, there's some dysfunction there.
Right. Thank you. Yep. Debbie. Shabbat shalom.
Hi. Okay, a couple of things. First of all, are there really Moabites, and I forget what the other one is? Do they exist today?
Do they exist today? I don't know if we know the answer to that question. I don't know the answer to that question, I will say. I mean, I am sure that there is lineage, right?
I was just wondering, that was just something I was curious about. But the other thing is, so a couple of things, so it brings to mind what Rabbi Michael Lerner used to say is like, what he really did love about Judaism is that we don't put our ancestors up on a pedestal. They're human and they're flawed. And in his words, we're all screwed up. And I love that. We don't have to be perfect. I mean, this is like way less than perfect, but but like we want to look at our ancestors for the humanness that they really are, and move from there. And then also kind of mirroring what you said, Kat, about holding the complexity, of this, like, wow, so ancestors that really are connected with us come from incest, and yet we have to hold them with as much respect as we would anybody else, so that doesn't taint a human being. And yet we're so, don't feel good about how this all happened. Just holding that complexity. So that was all I have to say.
It's beautiful, Debbie, for pointing out, right, that they're still part of the divine source, and to hold it that way. Yeah, thank you. Roger and Andre and Evelyn.
Yeah, it occurs to me there are probably other examples of incest like this in the Bible. It probably wasn't considered as strange to them, and let's see, this is a bizarre thought, but I was wondering if to the contemporaries of the people who are writing the Bible, I'm wondering if they didn't see this as sort of a comic interlude. The daughters getting the father drunk, one after the other. It sounds like, yeah. Anyway, so just that.
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, I agree. Probably wasn't so strange back then, and I do appreciate maybe it was just a comic interlude. Andre.
But to follow up what Roger was saying, the it seems to me that on the face of it, that the daughters drugged the father and then seduced him. So the idea, I don't know, when I think of incest, usually I think in a very sexist way that a male impregnates a female relative of some relationship. But in this instance, I don't know. The guy had been drugged. He may have been, quote, out of it. I don't know. And then the daughters come in. So I don't know. Perhaps there is no suggestion of blame on him. I don't know, but it's just confusing.
It is definitely confusing. Yes. Thank you. Evelyn and Kamal, I see your hand, and then I want to, after these two comments, then I want to finish the parsha because there's a whole bunch of important parts still coming. So, Evelyn, yeah.
I'm just thinking about the relationship between Abraham and Lot in the first place, talking about family and there being such separation. Within the family, it's an organic family. It's not even other people's, it's within the family that you also see the tension and the conflict.
Yeah. Well, it goes all the way back to Cain and Abel, right? Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a great, it's a great story about family trauma and family discord and then family love and all of it. It's a story, right? It's really a great story. Kamal, and then we're gonna read. I'm not gonna interrupt anymore, so we can get through it.
Thank you. Okay, so the one lesson for me is never underestimate the power of survival, especially with the female. The power of survival. Think about it. Back in the day, to see that type of devastation, having to move into a cave, they didn't want to go to another town. I mean, they saw the madness, and they're looking to survive. And so we're seeing, in my opinion, I'm not making any judgment to the morality of today versus back in during this period. And I could just say that that's how these people saw survival as a necessity.
Yeah.
And look at what was produced, the seed of what was produced and what we have today. So that's what I'm gonna keep it there.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Okay, now if we can go back to our Torah. I know it takes a moment. There we go. Thank you. I'm not going to interrupt anymore. We're going to read through it because we're already running late.
Okay, you want me to keep going, Kat? Abraham journeyed from there to the region of the Negeb and settled between Kadesh and Shur. While he was sojourning in Gerar, Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, "She is my sister." So King Abimelech of Gerar had Sarah brought to him. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "You are to die because of the woman that you have taken, for she is a married woman." Now, Abimelech had not approached her. He said, "O Lord, will you slay people even though innocent?" He himself said to me, "She is my sister." And she also said, "He is my brother." When I did this, my heart was blameless and my hands were clean. And God said to him in the dream, "I knew that you did this with a blameless heart, and so I kept you from sinning against me. That was why I did not let you touch her. Therefore, restore the man's wife, since he is a prophet. He will intercede for you to save your life. If you fail to restore her, know that you shall die, you and all that are yours." Early the next morning, Abimelech called his servants and told them all that had happened, and they were greatly frightened. Then Abimelech summoned Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? What wrong have I done that you should bring so great a guilt upon me and my kingdom? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." "What then," Abimelech demanded of Abraham, "was your purpose in doing this thing?" "I thought," said Abraham, "surely there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. And besides, she is in truth my sister, my father's daughter, though not my mother's, and she became my wife. So when God made me wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'Let this be the kindness that you shall do to me. Whatever place we come to, say there of me, he is my brother.' Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male and female slaves and gave them to Abraham, and he restored his wife Sarah to him. And Abimelech said, 'Here is my land is before you. Settle wherever you please.' And to Sarah he said, 'I herewith give you your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. This will serve as vindication before all who are with you, and you are cleared before everyone.' Abraham then prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his slave girls so that they bore children. For Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had closed fast every womb of the household of Abimelech because of Sarah, the wife of Abraham. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh took note of Sarah as promised, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh did for Sarah what had been announced. Sarah conceived and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, and the set time of which God had spoken. Abraham gave his newborn son, whom Sarah had borne him, the name of Isaac. And when his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God had commanded him. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter. Everyone who hears will laugh with me." She added, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would suckle children? Yet I have borne a son in his old age." The child grew up and weaned, and Abraham held a great feast on that day that Isaac was weaned. Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham playing. She said to Abraham, "Cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." The matter distressed Abraham greatly, for it concerned a son of his. But God said to Abraham, "Do not be distressed over the boy or your slave. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says, for it is through Isaac that offspring shall be continued for you. As for the son of the slave woman, I will make a nation of him too, for he is your seed." Early the next morning, Abraham took bread and skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He placed them over her shoulder together with the child and sent her away. And she wandered about in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water was gone from the skin, she left the child under one of the bushes, and when it sat down at a distance, a bow shot away. For she thought, "Let me not look on as the child dies." And sitting thus afar, she burst into tears. God heard the cry of the boy, and a messenger of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heeded the cry of the boy where he is. Come, lift up the boy and hold him by the hand, for I will make a great nation of him." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and let the boy drink. God was with the boy, and he grew up. He dwelt in the wilderness and became skilled with a bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother got a wife for him from the land of Egypt. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, chief of his troops, said to Abraham, "God is with you in everything that you do. Therefore, swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my kith and kin, but will deal with me and with the land in which you have sojourned as loyally as I have dealt with you." And Abraham said, "I swear it." Then Abraham reproached Abimelech for the well of water which the servant Abimelech had seized. But Abimelech said, "I do not know who did this. You did not tell me, nor have I heard of it until today." Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a pact. Abraham then set 7 ewes on the flock by themselves, and Abimelech said to Abraham, "What mean these 7 ewes which you have set apart?" He replied, "You are to accept these 7 ewes from me as proof that I dug this well." Hence the place was called Beersheba, for there the two of them swore an oath. When they concluded the pact at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, chief of his troops, departed and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk at Beersheba and invoked there the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the everlasting God. And Abraham resided in the land of the Philistines a long time. More?
Yeah, we're almost done.
Sometime afterward, God put Abraham to the test, saying to him, "Abraham." He answered, "Here I am." "Take your son, your favored one, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you." So early the next morning, Abraham saddled his ass and took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. He split the wood for the burnt offering, and he set out for the place which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his servants, "You stay here with the ass. The boy and I will go up there. We will worship, and we will return to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on his son Isaac. He took himself the firestone and the knife, and the two walked together. Then Isaac said to his father, "Father?" And he answered, "Yes, my son." And he said, "Here are the firestone and the wood, but where's the sheep for the burnt offering?" And Abraham said, "It is God who will see to the sheep for this burnt offering, my son." And the two of them walked on together. They arrived at the place of which God had told him. Abraham built an altar there. He laid out the wood. He bound his son Isaac. He laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to slay his son. Then a messenger of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh called to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham!" And he answered, "Here I am." "Do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your favored one, from me." When Abraham looked up, his eyes fell upon a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in the place of his son. And Abraham named that site Adonai Yireh, whence the present saying, on the mount of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, there is vision. The messenger of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I swear, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh declares, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your favored one, I bestow my blessing upon you and make your descendants as numerous as stars of the heaven. And just scroll up a little, please. And the sands of the seashore. And your descendants shall seize the gates of their foes. All the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants, because you have obeyed my commandment. Abraham then returned to his servants, and they departed for Beersheba. And Abraham said in Beersheba, sometime later, Abraham was told, Michal too has borne sons to your brother Nahor. Uz, the firstborn, Buz, his brother, and Kemuel, the father of Aram, and Chesed, and Hazo, and Pildash, and Jidlaph.
Heidi, we can stop here. Thank you. Okay, we can stop sharing. I just want to, we don't have a lot of time, and a lot of you have heard this, but there's a couple of things I just want to bring out in this part of the story. One of which is this debate and criticism about why Abraham didn't argue with God here, as he's being asked to sacrifice his own son, right? He doesn't get into an argument at all, right, with God. So one of the things, if you're reading the Hebrew, that you can notice in this passage is that the God that tells Abraham to kill his son is Ha-Elohim. And the angel of God that tells him not to kill his son is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And so I'm just going to, for those of you who haven't heard, I'm going to quickly give off Rabbi Lerner's teaching around this, which is Abraham, there's a midrash that Abraham was thrown into a fire by his father after Abraham destroyed all of his father's idols, and his father has a temper tantrum and yells at him. And Abraham survives this fiery furnace, which is interesting because now he's going to put his son, right, on a pyre of fire, right? So, and that obviously this is a very traumatic experience for Abraham, that his father's going to throw him into this fire. And so what Rabbi Lerner says is this is the repetition compulsion cycle that we carry out on our children, the harm that has been done to us. And so we can see that here. And so what's happening is, one argument we can make psychologically is Abraham's hearing the God of Ha-Elohim, which is the God of nature, like the God of repetition compulsion, the God that repeats things, telling him to kill his son because Abraham's in a traumatic state. I wonder if Abraham is in this traumatic state because Isaac is the same age that he was when he was thrown into the fiery pit. Because often psychologists tell us that's when the trauma gets re-triggered in us as adults, is when our children are our age when the trauma happened. So he is, Gabor Mate likes to say the hungry ghosts, right? Our hungry ghosts. So his hungry ghost has come back to haunt him. And then he has an awakening because the voice from Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh calls him. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the letters, right? We've talked about this a lot, is that force in the universe that makes possible the transformation from that which is Hey-Vav-Hey to that which can and ought to be the future, Yud-Heh-Vav-Hey. And so he's hearing the divine within and without calling to him and saying, no, don't do it. And thank God he did, right? But of course, Isaac undoubtedly is traumatized just like he was from them. Mm-hmm. But that is a very short giving off of this teaching that I just wanted us to make sure we got to, because we can't skip this story in the Torah when Abraham so brilliantly challenges God around Sodom and Gomorrah and fails to challenge God when he's asked to kill his own child. And also, of course, he's told to send out Hagar and Ishmael. But even then he says to God, I don't want to do this. And that God is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And the God that he argues with around Sodom and Gomorrah is also Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. But the God that tells him to kill Isaac is Elohim. So Abraham in that moment is somehow in a traumatized space, hearing a God of repetition, compulsion, rather than the God of transformation and possibilities. So I'll just bless us all that when we are in a traumatized place, when we are in min chametzar, a narrow consciousness, that we can too take some deep breaths and center ourselves and call out karatiyah to the divine and hear the divine answer us from an expanded consciousness. And that expanded consciousness can come from within, it can come from turning to others to help us as God did with Abraham, and it can come from outside of ourselves. But may, in this time of incredible narrow consciousness, may those of us who have the capacity to hear from an expanded source have the courage, like Abraham did with the divine around Sodom and Gomorrah, have the courage to stand up from the expanded consciousness place and speak truth to power and challenge injustice in a world that so desperately needs us to come forth. And all of you touched in to say what gives you the courage. So may you continually cultivate that audacity and courage in the next years and even today and tomorrow. So may we all be blessed with that. We'll do the blessing after Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu, brucha haya shechina, notenet haTorah. Amen.